First of all, I am so glad you chose this meeting in Duncan. I can't tell you how nice it was to get to sleep in my own bed last night. A lot of people forget when you're a statewide office that only the governor has housing provided, and so my housing is still here in Duncan, Oklahoma, and I love being able to get home when I can. Except now I know I need to trim my trees. That may have to wait a while. But thank you, and to the CPC for the work that you have been doing. I was thinking as we were preparing for this and listening to your comments about how grateful I am to have grown up here in Southwest Oklahoma, and as it relates to Fort Sill and Altus Air Force Base, how much I have realized during my years in the legislature, and then certainly as Lieutenant Governor, how much of an impact those two bases have on this area, and how much I was exposed to it without realizing what I was learning. And so when I got to the legislature and had the chance in 1994 after election session in 95 to be involved at times when the BRAC process was going on, to have legislative partnerships in Southwest Oklahoma who began at that time helping us who were currently in the legislature understand that we needed to be aware of what was happening, or else BRAC decisions would get made without any input or any thought of what was happening in Southwest Oklahoma, without any kind of involvement from us. And so I can tell you that as your next governor, I will continue to support the efforts that have already begun. And I know that Secretary of Veterans Affairs Norman Lamb is here, and I know he has been a strong advocate now for 16 years in his role as Cabinet Secretary in making certain that the issues as it relates to the military are heard by the governor's office. And then certainly Oklahoma's own Don Davis has chaired, not chaired, but been the liaison between the governor's office and the Strategic Planning Commission that was created by statute. And I think that that has been significant in helping tie the 5 military installations together, and the opportunity for representatives from each of those installations to have input, along with an appointed member of the House and Senate to sit on those committees. I know that those who have served, the members of the legislature who have served on that committee, have been loud voices with their colleagues to make sure that we understood what was necessary. So I can remember when we were talking about trying to acquire additional space in Altus, and there was some concern from some of the agricultural producers that their land was being taken. And the discussion and the education and the process had to go on to be able to explain what the long-range benefit was going to be if we were wanting to look at the sustenance or being able to sustain the mission of Altus Air Force Base. And so I got that. I understand that. And you know, as I was looking at the charts that were and the slides that were shown a few moments ago, I thought education, jobs, infrastructure sounds like what we talk about when we campaign on a statewide level. But I'm going to try to hone those comments and those thoughts today, specifically as they relate to Southwest Oklahoma, in the ability for us to maintain the growth that we have right now at Fort Sill and what we hope to continue to grow at Altus. We know that the numbers have been given to you in terms of what the economic impact is for our state and what it is specifically down here. And Chambers of Commerce and economic development experts who are here have trained me over and over to say, you know, $1 spent in your community turns over about 6 or 7 times, and that is the impact that you begin to have to keep up the small businesses in your communities, to be able to have people that have salaries so they can go out and buy consumables so that they can be able to contribute back to the community as well. So while we talk about the mission of what happens at Fort Sill and Altus, what you all are here for is to help us figure out how the benefit that exists in our communities can also then give back in the future planning so that we can be great partners in this next BRAC round. And I say next BRAC round because it's my understanding that in the last 3 weeks, Secretary Gates has begun that call for another BRAC. And so we have to be ready. It will not happen overnight. It will take a few years. It may be that 10-year time frame, but it's happening. And so it's reality. And the work that you all have already done as the CPC is a great foundation for us to be able to again move forward. We know from the state standpoint that even though there has been, I think, $1.5 million the first year the state committee was created, and then $1 million since then, that it's just under $6.5 million that has been able to be spent through the state's commission in giving monies back to the CPCs, to the communities, in an effort to help them with projects. Nowhere did that come, in my mind, to be more inadequate than when we saw the specific growth of the change of mission and the consolidations to move the entire, to make it the Fires Brigade at Fort Sill, the Centers of Fire Centers of Excellence. As we saw from the state superintendent candidate's perspective, the need to have new educational facilities on the Fort Sill base, we saw a difficulty in finding state dollars that were ready or willing to be able to be spent to help facilitate that growth. I can remember when the first number of those 10,000 that are coming to Fort Sill have come, and you started seeing the houses that were being built on base, which really didn't even relate to the growth at that time. I remember the concerns of the Lawton City Council and the Lawton City leadership as they would come to the state capitol and talk about, you know, we've got to provide some water sewer needs, we've got utility needs, and we can't meet all those needs ourselves as the city. What can the state do to help us? We as a state have an obligation, if we are going to say that we want these installations in our communities, then we have an obligation to say we're going to do what it takes to help support that mission and support the communities that are responsible for us being able to keep those bases in our area. So, as governor, it is my intention to be able to tell you that I don't think the $1 million is enough. I think you have to be able to find, when you're talking about capital needs, when you're talking about one-time expenses, we have to be in a position to help our communities, regardless of where they are, do what's necessary to sustain the families that are moving here for these missions. We have to be able to say we have a quality education, we have a good facility, we know we put good teachers in the classrooms there, but we have to be able to say this is what we will invest as the state, as we ask the federal government to invest in us back by keeping these missions here. When we do that, we have an obligation also to try to help the spouses of those families who are moving here. What can we do as a community to help those spouses find jobs? Lawton's pretty good at that because they're a lot more used to it than a lot of places. And yet I know legislation that had been introduced years ago, a number of years ago, in an effort to try to make it easier for those spouses to be able to find jobs. And we had difficulty getting, the representative from Southwest Oklahoma who authored that bill had difficulty getting legislative leadership to pay attention because they just didn't understand. I've also seen and been in the legislature when we made changes in our legislation to make sure that students who moved in, let's say in their sophomore, junior year, maybe even their senior year, and to qualify to graduate from an Oklahoma high school had to make certain priority academic student skills requirements. But if they had gone to school in other states, they might not yet have had Oklahoma history, or they might not yet have had some of the educational requirements to qualify for an Oklahoma degree. We have to be willing, and we were willing then, to make those changes in our educational requirements to make sure that the families, that the students, that the young people who were coming with their parents had an opportunity to graduate with a degree that meant something. These are the kinds of things I have been involved with already. That has given me a perspective that I think is extremely helpful as we move forward in these next few years. Thank you for being here. I look forward to your questions, and we appreciate the volunteer service of all of you who are serving on the CPC. Thank you very much.